guys, just was showing a property to some first-time home buyers, and they had an awesome question about, is it better to buy a home that's renovated, ready to go, move-in ready, or is it better to buy a fixer-upper and do the sweat equity thing? I thought that was a great question, so I thought I'd talk about it. First thing, my thesis here is going to be that I think in many cases for most people, buying move-in ready makes more sense than doing a fixer-upper. But of course, a fixer-upper gets all the press, and sweat equity, people talk about sweat equity a lot, and they watch HGTV, and it all seems very romantic. But let's talk about the reality of that situation. And right now we're talking about, let's say a first-time home buyer, or not even a first-time home buyer, but somebody that's going to do the work themselves, and they're going to live in the property while they're doing the work, because I think that's the case for a lot of people. They're not hiring a contractor. So those are the assumptions that we're making for this discussion. First of all, you're going to be living in a construction zone. Dust, just all that comes along with that. I think for a lot of my clients that have done this, you talk to them afterwards, and they're like, that was hard. And it cost more money than we thought it was going to. It took more time than we thought it was going to. And so I just think you need to go in with eyes wide open on those aspects of that project. It's going to take longer. It's going to be more expensive. You're not going to enjoy living in that construction zone. You need to want to really do this kind of thing. And there are people they love the art form of it. They want to do the work themselves, doing these kind of projects. They have the time to do it, and that really excites them. In those situations, maybe it makes sense. But another thing to consider is coming out of pocket for all those trips to Home Depot, all the materials, any labor that you can't do yourself, that you need to pay for, the tools, all that stuff. When you buy a house that's move-in ready, you're able to finance, all those improvements that somebody else has made. But when you're doing a fixer-upper, assuming you're not getting a construction loan, that is possible, but that's not what most people are doing. Most people are buying a property, and then kind of over time they're coming out of pocket for those repairs, for the materials and everything. So they're coming out of pocket. They're not able to finance those and roll them into the loan, unless at the end of the project they do a cash-out refinance, and pull out the money that they've put back in based on the way that they've increased the value of the property. That's an option, but that's not what most people do. Most people are coming out of pocket. So consider, if you have a finite supply of cash, as most people do, that you're going to be coming out of pocket for all those repairs, instead of being able to finance 80% of it or 97% of it if you're doing a low down payment option. Or if you're in a rural area and you're doing USDA financing, you can finance the entirety of your purchase. 100% financing is still an option. People a lot of times will say, what about investors? They buy property and they fix them up and they make a bunch of money. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is those investors are buying those properties well under market value. They're finding distressed sellers off the market. They're doing direct mail campaigns. They're doing, all kinds of ways to find these people that basically have to give their house away because they're in dire straits. They have to have the money, or they're moving or whatever, and the property's in disrepair. The majority of people that, like you and me, that are not professional investors, that are not looking for those distressed properties, we're buying retail. We got to find a property that, maybe it's a fixer-upper, but we're still paying retail for it. When you pay retail for a property and then you go out and do a bunch of improvements to that property, you're not necessarily going to have this giant piece of equity in the house just because you did the repairs yourself. I think some people think that just because they do that sweat equity, that at the end they're going to have all this equity through sweat. That's just not always the case. Most of the time when I talk to clients and they have, bought a property at a particular retail price and then put a bunch of money into it, at the end of the day, the property is worth about what they have into it, as far as the retail purchase price plus the repairs. At the end, they certainly, in some situations, you have somebody that really got a great property and bought it well, and maybe over time, coupled with that sweat equity, they really came out ahead. That certainly happens, but I think most of the time you're pretty much, the property at the end is worth about what you have into it. And so another thing is, when people fix up a property that, particularly when it's their property, when they're an owner occupant, not the fix and flips, but like somebody that lived in the property and did all those improvements in a way that would make them especially happy because they were getting to enjoy the improvements and live in the property. A lot of times those people spend quite a bit of money that somebody that's flipping a property wouldn't spend. They're going to do like hot tubs, they're going to go crazy on landscaping, they're going to use materials and do projects that just don't, like, they're not going to help their bottom line, but they're super cool and they get to enjoy them. And so when you buy a property where somebody has done those kind of improvements, they're taking the hit. They're not necessarily getting every dime out of that property that they put into it, but you're getting the benefit of getting all those improvements and not having to pay dollar for dollar what those improvements actually cost. So you see a lot of that. You see a lot of people that are like itemizing everything they've done to their property when they have it on the market, and it's like there's no way they're getting all that money back. And so when you buy that property, you're getting there's a lot of benefit to that. So I think the exception to this rule, like a lot of times when it really makes sense for people to do, to buy or fixer upper and do the sweat equity thing, is when they really want a particular part of town. Like let's say they want Old Town or Midtown, and they want like a small acreage property, or there's just something that they can't find on the market that they want to create themselves. So that's something that certainly happens a lot, especially if people are like location specific, if they really want a particular neighborhood, and maybe the finished properties that are finished to a level that they would be excited about are out of their price range or more than they want to spend, and they think they might be able to do those improvements themselves and get the property in the location they want, without hitting that crazy retail price. Certainly see that quite a bit. So hope that helps, guys. I think in conclusion, nothing wrong with buying move-in ready, letting somebody else do the work. Don't ever feel bad about that. I think a lot of times you're coming out ahead in those situations. So hope that helps. Have a great day.